Our story begins with a man who is getting beaten up while training, and he fears that he will not survive. A group of adventurers are glad to see that he has improved over the past couple of years, and they determine that the upcoming E rank test won't be a problem for him. A while later, entrance for the E rank promotion test is registered. Our protagonist Rick is one of them, and the receptionist named Alicia is happy to see him again. It's been 2 years since they last saw each other, and it was when Rick used to be a guild clerk. Alicia was surprised to hear that Rick became an adventurer, and Rick can't blame her because starting as an adventurer at age 30 is pretty unimaginable. Normally people start as F-rank apprentices when they are teenagers and become A-ranked just 2 years after that. Alicia wonders where Rick has been, so Rick explains that he was up in the mountains, training with some senior adventurers. Then some drunk guy tries to make an advance towards Alicia, but Rick calms him down. Everyone's attention turns to them when the guy passes out, so Rick reminds everyone to drink responsibly. Alicia gives him his exam ticket and wishes Rick luck on the E-rank exam. Rick is horrified when his ticket has a really unlucky number of 4242. Outside, Rick tells some woman named Rionette that he finished registering, and Rionette reminds him where his eyes are. Back inside, everyone is shocked to see an imprint of Rick's hand on the drunk guy's armor because it is made of steel. What's even more shocking is that the drunk guy is an infamous former A-rank adventurer. His name is Domold the Fiendish Knight, and Domold is a wanted criminal. Then Alicia is shocked when she wonders if Rick has become strong enough to easily leave an imprint in steel armor. A while later, Rick's height is measured, and the examiners are shocked to see that Rick is 32 years old. After that, participants have their magical energy tested by putting their hands on a crystal ball. One guy gets D-, and one girl gets a C+. Rick's turn is next, but the light Rick generates from the crystal is very low, so Rick is given an F-. The others have never seen a score so low, so they hope they never end up like Rick. Rick leaves, but the examiner is shocked when the crystal ball breaks. In the next exam, participants have to attack something to measure the force they can generate. The device can absorb insanely powerful attacks, so participants are told not to hold back. This device is a slime bag, and in the past, someone taught Rick about it too. Rick was told that the human body is the foundation of a good fighter, regardless of what weapons or magic they have. Rick was instructed to destroy the golden slime bag with his bare hands, because once Rick could do that, he would have a body that he could trust. However, this golden slime bag is known for being as strong as dragon's teeth. Rick was sure that he wouldn't be able to destroy it with his bare hands, but Rick was told that doing so is a simple task for an adventurer. Rick's instructor revealed that he could destroy 200 at once and demonstrated a bit of his power. Rick had to work his way up by hitting the bag with 50,000 punches every single day. Back to the present, one guy impresses everyone when he attacks a bag using strengthening magic. Some little guy is up next, and he declares that the time to show off his strength has finally come. This kid is the second son of the Duke, and rumors say that even though he is just 11 years old, he has magic equivalent to a C rank. Then this child prodigy shocks everyone when he prepares his attack. His setup is truly a flashy display, but everyone is shocked when the attack turns out to be a tiny fireball. Everyone is still impressed by the damage it does, and they call him a genius. Rick is amazed as well, because the kid used level 3 nature-composed blaze magic. Another look back at Rick's training some little girl, using an insanely powerful fire attack on him. Both attacks were blaze attacks, but they looked really different, so Rick wonders if the kid compressed his for indoor use. Soon it was Rick's turn, but the examiner didn't expect much from him. If magic isn't trained at a young age, then the chances for growth later in life are impossible. On top of that, Rick's results from the magic test were pitiful, so the examiner recommends that Rick just give up now. Rick actually agrees with everything the examiner says, but Rick can't help but think back to his training. Rick was exhausted from punching the bag one day, but Rick refused to give up. Rick acknowledges that he started his journey really late, but Rick believes that his age shouldn't matter. Because of this, Rick strikes the bag and shocks everyone when Rick absolutely destroys it with a single punch. Rick doesn't even know his own strength though, as Rick wonders if the bag was just defective. Everyone watches in terror as they wonder who Rick is. The kid is furious at Rick for stealing his attention, but the kid plans to show off during the defensive ability test. A moment later, we see that everyone is shocked again when Rick defends against level 4 nature-composed magic, something the kid couldn't even do. The examiner is surprised to hear that Rick only used level 1 magic to block the attack, so examiner decides to go one level up for the next one. The examiner will use level 5 attack magic, so the examiner suggests that Rick should use something higher than level 1 defense magic. Then Rick shocks everyone yet again, when Rick reveals that he can only use level 1 magic of offense and defense. Rick assures the examiner that he will be okay. So the examiner gets offended, as he believes that Rick is underestimating him. The examiner decides not to hold back, and starts his incantation. Examiner unleashes the level 5 attack, shocking everyone with its immense power, and even some might worry about it from really far away. His name is Sylvester, and Sylvester rushes to the arena because he couldn't believe such a powerful attack would be used during an exam. Then Sylvester is informed about Rick, and how Rick was able to block a level 5 attack with just level 1 defense magic. Sylvester assumes it must be some kind of joke, but he is told that it isn't. It's just an impressive 32-year-old F-rank adventure. Rick's report reveals that he was a guild receptionist for 14 years. Sylvester doesn't seem to know where receptionist is, and Rick's power makes him wonder if it is a title given to someone who has defeated a dragon. After the written exam, Rick expresses how confident he is that he aced it. Just then the kid named Freed angrily approaches Rick. Rick barely remembers Freed, so Rick assumes that he is lost and offers to help him to find his parents. Freed is furious and says that Rick took all the attention away from him. Just then Freed's older sister Angelica arrives and is upset that Rick made her brother cry. Freed says that the 40-year-old man ruined everything, but Rick angrily corrects him by saying that he is only in his 30s. Angelica only believes her brother and challenges the 40-year-old man to a duel. Rick points out that she will get her glove dirty, but Rionette explains that picking up the glove means Rick has accepted the duel. A moment later the two arrive in the arena, and Angelica declares that she must punish the old man. Duels in the kingdom allow each participant to propose one condition for the duel. Angelica proposes that the loser must act as the victor's servant until the end of their life, and her brother cheers her on. Angelica is a second-class knight, and Rick is shocked to hear that this means she is on the same level as a B-rank adventurer. B-rank adventurers are powerful enough to defeat monsters on their own, but Rionette still tells Rick to take it easy on her. Rick thinks Rionette has it all wrong and points out that he is just an F-rank adventurer who just registered a couple of days ago. Rick fears that he won't make it out of the duel alive, so Rionette tells him to just remember his training from the past 2 years. Rick begins to be inspired by the training montage that plays in his head, but Rick remembers how terrible it is, and it just makes him puke. Rionette tells him to be more confident, and reminds him of the group that trained him. The group called Orichalcon Fist prides itself on being the strongest in the continent, and they consider Rick to be one of its members. Rick thanks Rionette for restoring his confidence, and steps up to Angelica. Angelica knows that Rick is an F rank, so Angelica promises to refrain from ending his life. Angelica prepares for the fight, and Rick can tell that she is a swordswoman, who strengthens her body and weapons. Angelica wonders if Rick will be able to keep up with her speed, and Rick is shocked when she flies right by him. Angelica explains that she slowed down just a bit for Rick, and Angelica wonders if Rick is not talking because of how shocked he is. The little Freed laughs at the 40-year-old, and says that people call his sister the Lightspeed because of how fast she is. Angelica declares that she will actually attack him this time, without holding back, and Angelica uses her incredibly fast attack again. Rick goes quiet again, but we see that it's actually because Rick sees how slowly Angelica moving. Angelica is even slower than when Rick walks, so Rick wonders why anyone would call her the Lightspeed. Rick easily dodges her attack, but Angelica thinks Rick just got lucky because only a handful of first-class knights are able to properly react to her speed. Angelica is sure that Rick won't be able to dodge it a second time, but Rick is once again unimpressed by how slow she is moving. Rick can't believe that Angelica is a knight, and wonders if Angelica became one through nepotism. Rick considers for a moment that he might actually be really strong, but then Rick laughs at the thought. Rick prepares to dodge the attack again, but Angelica trips and starts rolling towards him. Rick just barely manages to dodge her out-of-control attack, but Rick is oblivious. Rick couldn't read her movements at all, and assumed that it was an incredible skill of hers. This little incident makes him remember that he is just an F rank, and there is a huge gap in skill between him and a second-class knight. Angelica knows that she actually tripped, but decides to pretend like the attack was on purpose. Angelica declares that she will attack again, but move even faster this time. Angelica's next attack takes a great toll on her body, so she can only use it 3 times. Angelica uses the attack that's supposed to be way faster, but it is still pretty slow in Rick's eyes. The clueless Rick fears that Angelica might use another terrifying rolling attack again if he makes the wrong move, so Rick dodges carefully. Angelica is shocked and wonders what she should do, because she can only use the attack 2 more times. Angelica decides to use her last 2 attacks in succession, and Rick realizes that he needs to fight back. Just then Angelica trips again on her last attempt. Rick thinks it is another terrifying technique, and fears that his attack won't land in time. Dust goes everywhere, and everyone watches in shock. When the dust clears, we see that Rick's attack created a crater in the ground. Angelica is horrified, as she realizes that if she didn't trip, then Rick's terrifyingly powerful attack would have landed on her. The clueless Rick thinks that Angelica purposely dodged it, and Angelica wonders who this guy is. Rick explains that he is just an F-rank adventurer that used to be a guild receptionist 2 years ago. Rick isn't sure he can do much against a second-class knight, but he will do his best during their duel, and use it as a learning experience. Rick excitedly prepares to continue their fight, but Rick is shocked when Angelica just surrenders. Fried is shocked as well, and Angelica says that she will let him win this time. Angelica tries to get out of there as quickly as possible, but Rick reminds her about the duel conditions. Rick didn't actually propose anything, but he is fine with using hers. Angelica doesn't want to serve him for the rest of her life, so Angelica asks her legs to exceed their limits just one more time and runs away. Rick doesn't really consider it a victory, but Rionette reminds them that it's time for the results of the preliminary test. Just then Rick is shocked when Rionette reveals that the other members of the group will be arriving soon. The terrified Rick wonders why they're coming, so Rionette explains that they want to see how Rick is doing. Rick has a really bad feeling about it, but it is too late as we see that the others are on their way. Then we learn about a hero who attempted to defeat the ultimate monster called Kaiser. Doing so would have rewarded him a treasure that can grant any wish. This hero failed to defeat the monster, but he had faith that an adventurer would one day be able to do it. Back with Rick, all participants are told that they will receive the test results soon. Mana will be sent to their exam tickets, and if it glows blue then they pass. Participants that pass will then participate in a mock battle for the second stage of the exam. Rionette tells the worried Rick to be more confident, and her kindness makes him wish he were 10 years younger, so they could date. Rionette isn't worried about the results, because if Rick fails then she decides that they will just triple Rick's training. Rick is sure that he won't survive more training like that, but he doesn't have to worry about that, as his card glows blue. Rick is glad to have passed the exam, but his attention turns when Rick smells something terrible. Just then a noble named Raster introduces himself, and he compliments Rionette's beauty. Rick tries to introduce himself to his fellow exam taker, but Raster declares that he has no business with a middle-aged man like Rick. Raster says that he dropped something, but this just turns out to be a pickup line. Raster says that he dropped his feelings of love deep inside Rionette's eyes. Raster would like to make her his wife, but Rick intervenes and declares that Rionette is his girlfriend. Raster mocks Rick for being an F rank in his middle age, but Rick points out that Raster looks like he is at least 25. Raster calls him an idiot, as Raster reveals that he became an E rank at 14 years old. He is now an A rank, and will be one of the examiners for the second stage of the exam. Raster tells Rionette to ditch the loser, but everyone is shocked when Rionette refuses Raster's offer and says that she is dating Rick. Then Rionette embarrasses Raster when she points out that his perfume is unpleasant, and Rick realizes that this guy is what smells. Raster becomes enraged and tells Rick that he better hope that he isn't his examiner for the test. Rick apologizes to Rionette for saying she was his girlfriend, but Rionette surprisingly doesn't mind. Rionette was actually happy that Rick got her out of that creepy situation. Raster, on the other hand, has come to hate Rick, and Raster vows to put him in his place. Just then we learn that Fried and Angelica are his younger siblings, and they complain to him about some old guy bullying them. This of course makes him more upset, and Raster promises to never forgive the old guy, which makes his family cry. His siblings tell him Rick's exam number, and Raster comes up with a devious plan. The next day Rionette reminds Rick to hold back his strength in the mock battle, but Rick has no clue why Rionette would say that. Just then some guy named Lynx explains that he will be in charge of Rick's test in the second stage. Rick is glad that his examiner isn't Raster, and Lynx thinks it's strange that a clerk in his 30s would decide to become an adventurer. Rick assumes that the guy is looking down on him, but Lynx is actually amazed by his determination. Lynx is a fellow middle-aged man, and Rick has inspired him. Lynx can tell that Rick has a goal that is motivating him, and Rick can't believe that Lynx knows so much. Lynx explains that it's because the two of them are very similar. Lynx became an adventurer at 25, and he is now in his 40s. It has taken him 20 years to reach a B rank, but his goal is to become an A rank. Rick can tell that Lynx won't give up on his dreams just like him, so Lynx looks forward to having a test with him. The two get along really well, as they even plan to get a drink after the exam, but we see that Raster is listening. After Lynx leaves, Lynx thinks about how he can tell how much Rick has trained, just from his handshake. This inspires Lynx to train harder, but Lynx is shocked when Raster appears and says that he wants to talk. Back with Rick, AnimeT can tell that Rick is in a really good mood, but participants in Rick's group are told that Lynx has fallen ill. Rick doesn't recognize the name when they're told that the replacement will be Raster, but Rick is shocked when AnimeT explains that Raster was the perfume guy from the day before. AnimeT points out that Raster is probably related to the nobles Rick met earlier, and everyone else in the group laments having Raster be their examiner. They are all terrified of him, as Raster is known as the man of 1,000 spells. Raster has a more infamous nickname as well, which is the F-Rank Crusher. Raster is called this because he torments participants that have gotten his attention. Rick is terrified to hear this, because Rick did a lot more than just get Raster's attention. Elsewhere, Raster shows his immense power, as he eliminates one of his own elite guards. Rick worries because he antagonized the guy who knows 1,000 spells. Rick considers himself to just be an F rank, who only knows first nature magic, so Rick wishes he could just go home. Going home would result in his training getting tripled though, so Rick realizes that he is a dead man no matter what he does. Rick has lost all his confidence because people keep mocking him for his age, but AnimeT believes that Rick can do it. Instead of losing confidence, Rick can gain confidence when others insult him. Rick is unsure, but AnimeT knows that Rick is strong, and AnimeT is confident that Rick will beat Raster and pass the exam. AnimeT has believed in Rick since the day he decided to become an adventurer, so Rick's confidence is restored. Just then a stranger calls him a young man, and this person can tell that Rick is struggling with something. He compliments Rick's youth, and offers to do some fortune-telling for him. Rick isn't so sure about it at first, but the guy offers to do the first one for free. Rick can't resist, so he goes to take a seat, but AnimeT notices a magic circle on the chair. Rick disappears and the stranger reveals that he is actually Freed, and Freed declares that he is a great actor. AnimeT demands to know where he teleported Rick, but Freed refuses to say anything. The furious AnimeT demonstrates her terrifying power when she slices off all of Freed's eyelashes with just the slightest movement. AnimeT terrifies Freed by declaring that she will take one of his eyes next and even lets him choose which eye he will lose. Freed is absolutely horrified and reveals that he can teleport objects only 100 meters away, so Rick should be close by. Nearby, Rick finds himself outside the venue, and Rick is confronted by a large group of serious-looking guys. Some butler explains that they are the elite guards of the Diarmid family, and they need Rick to sleep for a while. Rick realizes that it's the noble family that just keeps bothering him, and the guards explain that they have to make it, so Rick can't participate in the exam. Rick can't believe that they are resorting to dirty tricks like stalling him, but the butler points out that they aren't stalling him, they are ganging up on him. The butler reveals that their powers are equivalent to B and A ranks, so Rick realizes that there is no way he can win. Just then a group appears, and Rick is terrified to see that it's the senior members of his party. They wonder why Rick is outside when he should be taking the exam, and the guards are shocked to see that the big guy looks like a talking orc. The guards confront the orc, but for some reason Rick lies, and says that this group is helping him to warm up before the exam. The orc says that he will help out as well, but Rick just gets worried, and pleads to the butler to have his men back off for their own good. Rick explains that their lives are in danger, but the butler ignores him, and tells his men to eliminate everyone. Guard tries attacking the orc, but everyone is shocked when his sword shatters on the orc's head, which doesn't even move an inch. The orc compliments the guard for strengthening his body, but points out that he needs to do a better job, like strengthening his weapons too. The guard tries to punch the orc, but orc is easily stopped, and his hand is shattered in the process. The orc surprisingly heals him, and even gives him advice on how to stay more balanced during a fight. The blonde guy in Rick's group can tell that Rick is in trouble like always, and decides that he will have to resolve the issue peacefully. This guy's definition of peace is pretty messed up though, as he pulls out a giant gun, and explains that it is his newest invention. This thing is a crazy weapon, as it fires magic-infused crystals. The guards try to attack him, but they just end up beaten by the blonde guy's weapon. Rick tells him to stop, so the blonde guy assumes that Rick wants to try the weapon himself, but Rick is just worried that blonde guy might end their lives. Just then one of the guards comes up with the brilliant idea to take the little girl from Rick's group hostage. Guard threatens to take her life, but Rick gets horrified and wonders if the guard has some kind of death wish. Even the orc tells him to let her go for his own good. The little girl wonders what the guard is doing, so Rick tries to keep her calm and tells her that he just wants to play a game. The girl believes him and wonders what kind of game guard wants to play, but the guard foolishly decides to make his intentions clear. Guard hits her, so she becomes furious, and Rick can tell that they are done for. She absolutely decimates the fools, and the rest of the guards are shocked, because she unleashes 7th nature level magic, without an incantation. The butler now knows exactly who this little girl is, and reveals that she is the famous vampire mage. She is the strongest mage at only 10 years old, and she is known as the Demon Child of Ruin. Alyssarette is her name, and Alyssarette isn't the only famous person in the group. The blonde guy is a half-elf half-dwarf, who is more than 50 years old. He is the world's best weapons craftsman, and many think he somehow has technology from 1,000 years in the future. His name is Mizet. As for the orc, he has great intelligence and superhuman strength. He is also a master of support magic, and his name is Brufston. Then guards are stunned to hear that they all are S ranks, and members of the S rank only party, known as Orihalkin Fist. The butler never thought he would live long enough to witness them with his own eyes, but now he has decided to retire. Butler plans to live the rest of his life in peace, and the guards have never seen the old man so tranquil. Then Alyssarette has some fun destroying everyone with her one-word spells, and Rick decides that he doesn't want to train under these crazy people again, so Rick promises to do his best to pass the exam. Back at the venue, Rionette is still tormenting Freed. Freed wonders how long she plans to keep doing this stuff, so Rionette explains that she will keep going until Rick returns. Freed confidently declares that Rick won't be coming back because his family is taking care of him, but Freed is shocked when Rick casually says he is back. Rionette sends the Freed into a wall, and Rick wonders what happened to the place. Rionette assures him that everything is fine, and she only destroyed a small part of the wall. Just then injured Lynx appears, and Lynx explains that Raster beat him up. Rick is horrified to hear this, because Rick realizes that Raster did this so he could be in charge of his exam. Lynx told Raster that his dream was to build a school in his hometown, but Raster just mocked and tormented him. Lynx couldn't do anything against someone powerful like Raster, and now Lynx thinks that having a dream at his age is foolish. Lynx fears that Raster will do something much worse to Rick, so Lynx begs him to drop out of the exam. Rick refuses to do so, and declares that he wants everyone to know that it is fine to start doing things at any age. Back with Raster, he is busy taking up more of his own men, and one of his guards explains that there is an intruder. Raster is glad though when he realizes that Rick has decided to come. Raster thought that Rick would have dropped out by now, but this is okay with him, as Raster promises to show Rick what real fear looks like. Raster makes a grand display of his magic, but Rick angrily declares that he will send Raster flying. In this stands a guy named Adolphe, who watches the A rank exam and explains the 4 cores of power to us. They are physical strength, dexterity, mana capacity, and magic control. Adolphe has the ability to visualize the scores of other people's 4 cores of power, and he demonstrates it to one of the participants. Adolphe checks Raster and is amazed by his A rank scores. His eyes feel a bit strained, because it is dangerous for him to look at anyone too strong. Adolphe decides to check Rick's stats, but they are so great that his eyes feel like they are about to explode, and Adolphe screams in pain. Nearby, Alicia and Rionette introduce themselves to each other. The other members of Rionette's party call her over, so Rionette invites Alicia to join them. Alicia is shocked to see an orc sitting there, and Rionette declines Mizet's offer to sit next to him because Rionette knows that Mizet has bad intentions. Mizet offers the seat to Alicia after he takes an interest in her, but Rionette gets Alicia out of safety. Rick finally enters the arena, and Brufston asks Rionette how their rookie will do. Rionette reveals that he will pass the exam, but Alicia points out that it won't be so easy because Rick is going against Raster. Raster is in A rank, and he always goes overboard to embarrass all the rookies. Alicia is shocked though when the members of Rick's party say it won't be a concern. Raster's siblings cheer him on, and Raster is impressed that Rick is able to get away from his guards. Raster declares that he is nothing like his weak guards, but Rick can tell that just by looking at him. Rick wonders why Raster became an adventurer in the first place, so Raster explains that he is a noble, so he just did it to raise his status even further. Raster has actually grown bored of being an adventurer and he is just waiting for the perfect time to quit. Rick can tell that this guy is not a real adventurer, so Rick refuses to lose to someone like him. Raster starts to fight off with a level 1 attack, but he wonders if Rick is terrified after not moving at all. Rick isn't scared, as Rick is just reminding himself not to let his anger control him. AnimeT told him to use the first minute of his fight to calm himself and observe his opponent. Rick does that, but Raster is impatient, and Rick is stunned to see him use level 3 magic without an incantation. The insanely powerful attack hits Rick, but Rick remains standing strong as he is analyzing his opponent just like AnimeT said. Alicia is worried about him, but Bruston says that an attack like that is nothing for Rick. Bruston explains that out of the 4 core of power, a magic reserve has to be developed before a person reaches the age of 20, otherwise there is no hope for further growth. Rick became an adventurer at 30, so his magic reserves are extremely low. However, Bruston had a solution, and we see in the past that Bruston told Rick that the one thing he could always depend on was his body, and he decided that they would take a little stroll to the next town over. The problem was that Bruston strapped Rick to giant weights, which were 100 kilograms each. Rick was horrified, but Bruston just told him to hurry up, because there was a den of carnivorous monsters in the forest. To make up for Rick's lack of magic reserves, Rick trained exhaustively in the other 3 areas. Raster attacks Rick with level 4 magic this time, but Rick once again is unfazed. Then Bruston reveals that for physical strength, he built Rick up from scratch. Even Mizet hates doing bothersome things, but Mizet was the one who taught Rick magic control. Mizet took this responsibility because he didn't want Rick turning into a pile of ash after an attack one day. Rick was trained in dexterity by AnimeT, and Alicia is shocked to learn that AnimeT is not just some normal maid. Rick amazingly stuck onto all the training they threw at him, and now Rick stands within the S ranks, just like the rest of them. Raster unleashes another attack, and AnimeT explains that Rick has no awareness of how powerful he is. This is because no matter what kind of insane training they put Rick through, they always told him that an F rank should be able to do it easily. Just like the time Bruston told him that an F rank can smash through a giant boulder with one strike. Raster does some trash talking as he unleashes a barrage of attacks, and Alicia is horrified when one attack seems to crush Rick. Raster mockingly says that he went a bit overboard, but Raster is stunned when Rick emerges unharmed. Raster is annoyed by his resilience, and his siblings are shocked by the old man's strength. Raster powers himself up to finish the battle with his fists, but Rick just easily knocks him back. Now Rick finally understands what AnimeT was telling him. Raster is so obsessed with the talents he was born with, that Raster neglects to refine them further. Raster has vast reserves of magic, but Raster is sloppy with everything he does. Against an opponent like Raster, Rick is sure that he can't lose. Raster says that Rick just got lucky, and his siblings are amazed when he finally decides to use his full incantation magic. His long incantation results in a crazy big fireball attack, but everyone is shocked when Rick easily stops it with just one hand. Rick says that the attack was too sloppy, and Mizet explains that Rick worked his magic with a high degree of accuracy to block the attack. Rick was so precise that he didn't have to use 100,000th of the energy that Raster did to create the attack. This means that someone like Rick, with barely any magic reserves, can do stuff like that as long as they have precise magic control. Raster continues to say that Rick is just getting lucky and goes in for another attack. Rick is too quick for him, so Raster changes his body to steel to avoid getting obliterated. Raster finally admits that Rick possesses abilities above an E rank, but still says that luck is choosing Rick's side. Rick can't believe that Raster still refuses to acknowledge him, so Rick points out that he isn't even using magic. Rick is just using dexterity. Raster just wants to know how Rick got so strong in just 2 years, but Rick is insulted by the question as he thinks about his torturous training. Rick had to run through explosions, swim through the monster's paralyzing fluid until he choked on it, and Rick wasn't allowed out of a dragon's nest until he defeated it. Alicia is horrified to hear just some of the training Rick went through, because normally someone wouldn't survive it. Then Alicia is shocked when Bruston reveals that Rick didn't survive it. Rick lost his life multiple times, but Bruston's healing can bring someone back to life as long as it is applied immediately after passing away. This kind of horrifying training was necessary, because repeatedly breaking down and rebuilding someone's body is how they get stronger. Mizet was also impressed by how Rick stayed in there, no matter how crazy the training got. Mizet thinks back to his training with Rick, and how he kicked Rick off a mountain, so Rick could develop a sense of being able to feel the wind. This of course leads Rick to lose his life repeatedly, and Brufston have to revive him. Alyssarette was just as guilty of this type of training, as we see that Alyssarette crushes Rick under boulders. Rionet's training involved learning to cut falling trees by using their momentum, but this caused Rick to lose his life as well. Raster just assumes that Rick is lying because he refuses to believe that such terrible training even exists, and even if it did exist, Raster can't see anyone being motivated enough to go through it. Rick's response is simple. His dream is his motivation, and his dream is to defeat the world's strongest monster, Kaiser Alsapiet. Raster and Fried have a good laugh, as they call Rick an idiot, and they can't believe that he is being serious. Alicia knows that Kaiser Alsapiet is the ultimate monster that appears in the legends of the hero Yamato, and Brufston reveals that Rick's goal is also the ultimate goal of their group, the Orichalcum Fists. Raster points out that the legends of the hero Yamato are just bedtime stories for kids, and defeating Kaiser is the dream of a small child. Rick doesn't care what Raster thinks, as his dream has nothing to do with him anyway. Raster agrees, and decides to put an end to their battle. Raster surprisingly uses level 7 magic to restrain Rick, and Raster tells Rick not to get too amazed just yet. Raster plans to show Rick what true talent looks like, and he wants to make it so Rick can never speak nonsense again. Raster finishes a long incantation, and declares that he will show everyone the greatest magic a human can wield, level 8 nature composed magic. This is the greatest magic that Raster, the man of 1,000 spells, has in his arsenal. This is Raster's ultimate move, and it results in Raster controlling a giant tree golem from the inside. Raster commands Rick to grovel before him, and he mocks Rick for planning to use some airshot attack. Rick declares that he will punch right through him, but Raster says he is being delusional. Rick asked Raster how many times he had practiced using the golem before, but Raster had no clue, because he mastered it after only using it a couple of times. Then Rick shockingly reveals that he has used his airshot attack 100 million times. Raster's siblings think he is lying, and Alicia wonders if 100 million times in 2 years is even physically possible. Of course Brufston reveals that it is possible, but only if space-time magic is used. Raster has heard enough, so he announces that it's time to crush Rick's dreams, just like he did to Link's. Raster launches his most powerful level 8 attack, but Rick breaks free from the restraints and shockingly stops the attack with his level 1 airshot attack. Raster mocks him as he assures that he will crush Rick, but Raster is stunned when his golem begins to break apart. Then Rick's airshot destroys Raster's golem. Raster refuses to believe that this could happen to a noble like him, but his golem is destroyed and Raster is sent flying into the stands. Now Rick taunts the so-called noble elite, and points out that his dream is still completely unscathed. Everyone is amazed to see Rick victorious, because Rick just looks like a normal old guy. Rick's group congratulates him on his victory, and Rick finally realizes that he really has gotten a lot stronger. Rick can't believe that he didn't realize how strong he actually is until now, and thanks everyone for helping him. Just then they hear Raster's siblings telling Raster to get medical treatment, but Raster is determined to speak with Rick. Rick can already tell that Raster is wondering how an elite like him could lose to a late starter like Rick. Fried is held back from defending his brother, but Rick just has an answer for Raster. Rick simply explains that he has a limited number of techniques he can use, but he trains himself for that exhaustively. Rick gives Raster some advice on how he can do the same, but Raster is still angry. Raster promises to be Rick's examiner again for his next promotion, and declares that he will win next time. Raster's siblings leave with him, but Angelica surprisingly shows Rick some respect. The next day the participants that pass the E-rank exam are announced over a loudspeaker. Their numbers are announced in order, so Rick patiently waits while his friends wait nearby. Rionette is surprised to see him so calm, so Rick explains that he was just remembering something. So now what will happen next? Subscribe to our channel to find out what will happen next. So friends, if you liked our recap video, then please like and share this video and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.